What if I told you that the government is quietly rolling out a massive fiscal balancing act that could seriously lower your monthly commute costs? And yet, almost nobody is talking about it. What if this hidden tax break is actually tied directly to a major delay in India's green energy timeline, simply because car manufacturers are absolutely terrified that a new fuel might literally destroy your engine? Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to put on our policy expert hats to unpack exactly what is happening behind the scenes at your local petrol pump.
So, a huge policy shift has just been triggered. In a series of official announcements, the government has waived basic excise duties on higher-grade ethanol-blended fuels. And honestly, it's a high-stakes financial gamble. Essentially, the government is deliberately subsidizing a specific fuel to force a market shift. They're making this massive fiscal sacrifice to change consumer behavior, and this single policy move is absolutely going to dictate what kind of car you buy next.
Now, this tax holiday specifically applies to fuel mixtures containing between 22% and 30% ethanol. I know, to most people, terms like excise duty exemptions just sound like dry, bureaucratic jargon. But what we're really looking at is a fuel composition of 22 to 30% plant-based alcohol, mixed right in with standard petrol. By completely waiving the taxes that are normally applied to this fuel, the government is artificially making it the absolute most attractive option on the market.
Okay, let's dive in. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. The hidden fuel tax cut. 2. What is ethanol blending? 3. Why ethanol harms older engines. 4. The government's clever compromise. 5. Your wallet and vehicle choices. And 6. Fueling India's economic future. Section 1. The hidden fuel tax cut. Recently, the Ministry of Finance issued a really historic notification that completely exempts these high ethanol petrol variants from standard fuel taxes.
To really grasp the magnitude of this, we have to understand what basic excise duty is and why it's so crucial. Basic excise duty is a flat tax levied by the central government on every single liter of fuel produced or imported into the country. From a policy perspective, this is literally one of the government's absolute biggest revenue generators. We're talking billions of dollars flowing into the treasury through this exact tax. So for the government to willingly just give that up, it's a massive, unprecedented sacrifice. By pulling this incredibly powerful financial lever and removing that tax, the government is aiming to artificially lower the cost of greener fuels. They want to make them significantly cheaper than the standard petrol you are buying today.
Moving on to Section 2. What is ethanol blending? Before we unpack the dramatic engine damage risks, let's establish some baseline facts about what exactly is going into our gas tanks right now.
Let's look at the breakdown of the fuel most of us are currently using. Ethanol is essentially a high-purity plant-based alcohol. Instead of being drilled from underground oil reserves, it's actually made locally. They do this by fermenting sugars and starches found in agricultural crops. Things like sugarcane and corn. Now, for the past few years, the country has aggressively rolled out E30 petrol. That means the fuel is a cocktail made of 80% standard petrol and 20% plant-based alcohol. But here is an absolutely crucial scientific fact you need to keep in mind. Ethanol actually has a lower energy density than traditional petroleum. What does that mean for you? It means that burning a liter of pure ethanol gives you slightly less mileage than burning a liter of pure petrol. It just simply contains less chemical energy per drop.
Let's use a simple analogy to see how this whole tax break connects to that energy efficiency reality. Imagine you run a local juice shop. You want to encourage people to buy a new, eco-friendly green spinach smoothie instead of the standard high-sugar mango juice. But here's the catch. The green smoothie doesn't keep you full for quite as long, which is exactly like how ethanol has a slightly lower energy density. To convince reluctant customers to make the switch anyway, you decide to completely waive your profit margin on the green smoothie, making it incredibly cheap. The government is doing the exact same thing with fuel. By removing the excise duty on higher ethanol blends like E30, they are basically forcing oil companies to pass that massive tax saving down to you. The fuel might give you a tiny bit less mileage, sure, but the price drop is so massive that the green fuel becomes financially irresistible.
Section 3. Why ethanol harms older engines. This is where we uncover the fierce, silent battle between the Ministry of Petroleum and the car makers who are raising a massive red flag.
So why did car makers panic when the government originally wanted to force higher E25 or E30 fuel onto the market right away? Well, because while modern cars are engineered for E20, older ones absolutely cannot handle anything higher. To understand why, we just have to look at the basic chemistry. Remember, ethanol is essentially alcohol, and alcohol acts as a highly corrosive solvent. When you pump fuel with 30% alcohol into an older engine, that solvent begins to dry out the flexible rubber seals until they literally become brittle and crack. It slowly eats right through standard aluminum fuel lines and degrades plastic injectors. You wouldn't just hear a funny noise, you would see very specific signs of engine damage. Drivers would notice severe sputtering at traffic lights, really rough engine idling, flashing check engine lights, and literally fuel dripping underneath the car from eaten-away hoses. It's a mess. Furthermore, ethanol absorbs water from the ambient air. If an E30 blend sits inside a parked car's tank for a while, that water separates, sinks to the bottom, and causes severe internal rust, which triggers a catastrophic wave of engine failures.
Section 4. The government's clever compromise. Acknowledging these severe technical hurdles, policymakers had to rapidly course-correct and pivot.
Originally, the plan was the stick. The government wanted to mandate E25 fuel nationwide, which risked engine failure for millions of older vehicles. But instead, they recognized the danger and chose the carrot. And honestly, this is a moment of fiscal brilliance. They officially agreed to delay the mandatory rollout of E25 fuel. This unprecedented compromise protects the current fleet of cars on the road right now, and it gives car makers vital breathing room to test new materials and upgrade their assembly lines. But they still need to seed the future market, right? So, instead of forcing the fuel onto the public through strict laws, they are using these massive tax waivers. They are ensuring that when E30 fuel arrives, it will be priced so aggressively low that adventurous consumers will voluntarily line up to buy it. To back up this massive shift, the government is working directly with oil companies to build a highly targeted infrastructure blueprint. We're talking about entirely separate underground storage tanks, dedicated E30 dispensing nozzles, and strict fuel segregation at urban stations. This is going to change your everyday experience at the petrol pump. You will likely be looking for a completely different colored handle, perhaps a green nozzle versus the standard black one. This physical separation is absolutely vital to ensure a commuter won't accidentally pull up and pour highly corrosive E30 into an older, incompatible motorcycle. That would be an absolute mechanical disaster.
Section 5. Your wallet and vehicle choices. Let's bring this explainer directly home to you and answer the ultimate "so what" regarding your daily budget and your personal vehicle.
All right, here is your practical guide as a vehicle owner. First off, if you currently drive a car or motorcycle built before 2023, the delayed mandate is a massive win for you. You must stick to standard E20 fuel, which is going to remain widely available. You do not have to worry about high alcohol fuel quietly destroying your engine parts. However, if you are planning to buy a brand new vehicle, pay very close attention. Let's actually do a calculation of your potential monthly savings. Imagine the massive tax cut makes E30 fuel 10 rupees cheaper per liter than standard petrol. If you drive, say, 1,000 kilometers a month, let's look at the math. Because E30 has slightly lower energy efficiency, you might need a tiny bit more fuel to travel that exact same distance compared to standard petrol. But because the E30 fuel is a full 10 rupees cheaper per liter, the running costs heavily favor the new fuel. Even after accounting for that slight drop in mileage, switching to a subsidized E30 fuel could easily save you hundreds of rupees every single month. Buying a newly certified flex fuel vehicle today means you can safely use this deeply discounted fuel and pocket some really substantial savings.
Section 6. Fueling India's economic future. Let's zoom out a bit to examine the broader macroeconomic ripple effect this policy shift has on the entire nation. 80%. That is a staggering statistic. That is the exact amount of crude oil India currently imports just to keep the country moving. As a policy expert, I can tell you that this heavy reliance is a massive geopolitical vulnerability. Importing 80% of our oil drains literally billions of dollars in foreign exchange every single year. When a country sends that much wealth overseas, it inherently weakens the domestic currency and drives up inflation at home, which ends up affecting the price of absolutely everything you buy. And this is exactly why the government is so aggressively prioritizing domestic agricultural fuel over imported crude oil. Imported crude leaves us entirely reliant on foreign oil cartels and, of course, drives high emissions. But domestic ethanol, it completely changes the game. By using these massive tax cuts to incentivize the market, the government is keeping those billions of dollars right inside the domestic economy. Instead of sending shipping containers full of cash to overseas oil cartels, that exact same money goes directly to local sugarcane and corn farmers. It transforms traditional agriculture into a booming energy sector in rural communities. This creates thousands of new jobs while simultaneously driving the green energy transition. It's huge.
So, to wrap it all up, the government's massive excise duty waiver on these high-blend petrol variants is just a textbook example of using smart economic incentives over raw force.
It's a brilliant balancing act. On one side, they have successfully shielded millions of older vehicles from catastrophic corrosive engine damage by delaying those strict mandates. But on the other side, they have created a highly profitable tax-free incentive for consumers to go out and buy the next generation of clean cars. And it's a move that fundamentally strengthens the nation's long-term energy independence.
Which brings us to our final question for you today. Now that high-blend ethanol fuels are going to be significantly cheaper due to these massive, hidden tax cuts, would you be willing to upgrade your next vehicle to an E30 compliant model just to capture those monthly savings? Or are you still a little worried about the long-term chemical impact of alcohol in your engine's life? It is definitely a huge financial and mechanical decision to weigh up. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating policy shift, and I will catch you in the next explainer.